Imagine a figure standing atop a mountain of slag, iron-crowned and radiating a malice so cold it burns the soul. This is Sauron the Great, the Dark Lord of Mordor, a being whose very eye can pierce cloud, shadow, and earth. For thousands of years, the free peoples of Middle-earth lived in the long shadow of his power, believing that no single hero could ever hope to stand against the master of the One Ring. But is Sauron truly invincible in a duel of blades and wills? History tells a different story, one of ancient hounds, High-Elven kings, and even wizards who held the line against the darkness. Welcome to Echoes of Middle-earth, and today we are stepping onto the ultimate battlefield to answer the most high-stakes question in the Legendarium. Who could actually defeat Sauron in a one-on-one battle? To understand who can defeat him, we must first look at the nature of the beast. Sauron was not a man or an orc, he was a Maya, a primordial spirit of the same order as the wizards, but one who had fallen into the service of the first Dark Lord, Morgoth. In his beginning, he was a student of Aule the Smith, giving him a mastery over the material world that he would later use to forge the Rings of Power. He was a sorcerer of dreadful power, a master of phantoms and shadows who could shift his shape from a fair-seeming lord to a monstrous werewolf or a vampire. By the end of the Second Age, he had poured a great part of his native strength and will into the One Ring, making him stronger than ever while he wore it, but creating a fatal vulnerability should it ever be lost.
The most obvious candidates for defeating Sauron are the Valar, the great powers of the world. Sauron's own master, Melkor, Morgoth, was the mightiest of the Ainur and stood far above Sauron in the cosmic hierarchy. While Sauron was a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, Melkor was a being who contended with all the other Valar and held dominion over the earth for ages. Among the Valar who remained faithful, Tulkas the Strong is perhaps the most dangerous one-on-one opponent in existence. Known as the Valiant, Tulkas laughs in the face of his enemies and needs no weapon but his own hands. In the Elder Days, Tulkas was the one who wrestled Melkor himself, casting him upon his face and binding him with chains. If Sauron were to face Tulkas, the duel would likely be over before it began, as Sauron's sorcery would be no match for the raw, unyielding strength of the champion of Valinor. Beyond the Valar, we look to the Maiar, Sauron's own peers. The most formidable of these is Eonwe, the herald of Manwë, whose might in arms is surpassed by none in Arda. At the end of the First Age, Eonwe led the host of the West in the final overthrow of Morgoth, and it was to Eonwe that Sauron originally surrendered in fear after the fall of Thangoratrim. While the two are of the same order, Eonwe's role as the supreme commander of the Valar's military forces suggests a martial superiority that Sauron, who often prefers guile and deceit over direct combat, could not match.
However, the most famous one-on-one defeat Sauron ever suffered occurred in the First Age at the hands of a hero who wasn't even a humanoid. This was Huan, the Hound of Valinor. When Sauron attempted to capture Luthien Tenuviel, he took upon himself the form of the greatest werewolf the world had ever seen. Yet even in this monstrous shape, Sauron was overmatched. Luthien used her magic to cause Sauron to stumble, and Huan sprang upon him, catching the Dark Lord by the throat. No wizardry or devil's art could release Sauron from that grip. He was forced to yield the mastery of his tower and flee in the shape of a vampire. This battle proves that Sauron is physically vulnerable and can be mastered by a sufficiently powerful spirit, especially when aided by the blindness of his own malice. In the Third Age, the most direct threat to Sauron's spiritual authority was Gandalf the White. As Gandalf the Grey, the wizard was already a servant of the secret fire and a wielder of the flame of Anor, powers that allowed him to stand against a Balrog of Morgoth. After his resurrection, Gandalf became even more potent.
described as Saruman as he should have been, while Gandalf himself admitted that black is mightier still, referring to Sauron's cumulative power in Mordor. He was the only being in Middle-earth who could effectively strive with the Dark Tower from afar to protect the Ring-Bearer. In a direct one-on-one duel of wills, Gandalf might not defeat Sauron in the sense of destroying him, but he possessed the spiritual weight to turn back the Dark Lord's thought and provide a light in dark places that Sauron could not extinguish.
We must also consider the legendary High Elves, who lived at once in both the seen and the unseen worlds. Glorfindel, an elf lord of a house of princes, was so powerful that even the 9 ringwraiths fled before him. It was said that the ringwraiths were only shadows compared to the power they would have if Sauron regained the One, but Glorfindel's presence was a white fire that they could not endure. Similarly, the Lady Galadriel was a peerless match for Sauron's mind. She possessed Nenya, the Ring of Adamant, and with it, she maintained a land where the shadow could not enter. When Frodo offered her the One Ring, she saw a vision of herself as a dark queen who would be stronger than the foundations of the earth, suggesting that her inherent power, if augmented by the ring, would have eclipsed Sauron's own. The history of the Second Age provides us with the only recorded instance of mortal men and elves defeating Sauron in physical combat. At the end of the last alliance, Sauron was forced to come forth from Barad-dûr after a 7-year siege. He was met by Gil-galad, the High King of the Noldor, and Elendil the Tall, the King of the Dúnedain. This was the definition of an epic 1v2. Gil-galad wielded the spear Eglans, which none could withstand, and Elendil wielded Narsil, the sword that shone with the light of the sun and moon. They threw Sauron down, though both kings perished in the act, proving that the combined physical and spiritual might of the greatest leaders, men and elves, could break the Dark Lord's physical form. It was then that Isildur, Elendil's son, used the hilt shard of Narsil to cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand, an act that caused the Dark Lord's spirit to flee into the waste places.
A unique and often debated figure in this conversation is Tom Bombadil. When the Council of Elrond discussed the One Ring, they noted that Bombadil seemed to have a power even over the ring, or rather that the ring had no power over him. He could set it on his finger and not disappear, and even make the ring itself vanish for a moment. However, the council concluded that Bombadil could not defeat Sauron in a battle of arms. He is his own master, but he is not a warrior. If the rest of Middle-earth were to fall, even Bombadil would eventually fall, last as he was first, as the darkness would consume the very earth he is tied to. What about the dwarves? While individual dwarves like Gimli are incredibly hardy, history suggests they were better at resisting Sauron's influence than defeating him in a duel. Sauron gave 7 rings to the dwarf lords, but they could not be turned into wraiths or dominated by his will. Their hearts were only inflamed with a greed of gold. While a dwarf lord like Osgiliath of Belegost was able to wound the dragon Glaurung, there is no record of a dwarf ever standing alone against Sauron himself.
Finally, we must acknowledge the strange chances of the world. In the end, it was not a mighty warrior or a high lord who dealt the final blow to Sauron's power, but 2 halflings from the Shire. Frodo and Samwise did not defeat Sauron in a physical duel, but they defeated his will. Sauron's greatest weakness was his inability to comprehend a spirit that did not desire power. He watched for a mighty one to appear and challenge him with the ring, focusing his eye on Aragorn and the captains of the West. While he was distracted by the bait of the armies at the Black Gate, the small hands of the hobbits carried the ring to the fire. Sauron was defeated by pity, specifically the pity of Bilbo and Frodo, who spared Gollum, for without Gollum's final intervention at the Crack of Doom, the quest would have failed.
So who can defeat Sauron in a one-on-one battle? If we are talking about raw, primordial power, the answer is any of the Valar or the mightiest Maiar like Yonwe. If we are talking about historical precedents, the answer is Huan the Hound, or the tag team of Gil-galad and Elentil. But the most profound answer is that Sauron was defeated by the weakness of his own pride in the strength of the humble. He was a being who could calculate the trajectory of a star or the strength of an army, but who could not foresee the courage of a hobbit who simply wanted to go home to his garden.
Thank you for joining us for this analysis of the Dark Lord's vulnerabilities here on Echoes of Middle-earth. Whether it is the spear of a king or the mercy of a hobbit, the legends of Tolkien remind us that even the most immeasurable strength has a breaking point. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the battles and lore of the Third Age, please like and subscribe as we continue to unearth the hidden truths of Arda. Until the stars shine again on our meeting, may your heart stay as resolute as the heroes of old and your path be guided by the light that never fades.